Hello and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. I am so glad you joined me again today. And before we get started in introducing my special guest, I would like to just give a shout out to our show's sponsor, Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. And if you want to stay healthy like me, then I would contact him because he gives you personal care and helps you and your body stay as healthy as it can be. Today, I will be your host and co-host. My awesome, wonderful co-host, Mary Browning, is not going to be with us today. She's on a very important work for life, and we will look forward to her sharing her experience when she gets back. So I'm going to be jumping in here and doing Mary's part as well, and that is giving a trigger warning. So if our conversation today, which we will be having a lady share her abortion testimony, how that impacted her, and then how God is now using that for his glory. But we will be sharing a personal experience. And if you're feeling triggered, emotional in any way, invitation to you to seek further healing, especially if you've had an abortion in your past. And we want to encourage you, me and my guests want to encourage all of our listeners and viewers who've had an abortion and not gone through abortion recovery to do so, because it is life-changing. Whether you think you need it or not, you need to find an abortion recovery program in your area and see what the Lord has for you. And you can go to the H3 helpline at 866-721-7881. You can call that number. They can hook you up to an abortion recovery program in your area. Or you can go to operationoutcry.org. And there are a list of resources for abortion recovery on there as well. Or you can pick up my book, Deceived, How God Brought Purpose from My Pain, which talks about my personal experience and then shares the importance of going through healing and recovery, and then what God can do with that if you allow him. So this is also a warning. If you have young children with you, you might want to distract them or put them in another room to play, because this topic is not for young ears. Now, I would like to introduce a young woman that I had met years ago through a mutual friend. We were on a pro-life mission in Washington, D.C. is when I first met her, and I'm very excited to have her on my show. So welcome, Serena Dye.
Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be here. My name is Serena Dye. I'm first and foremost a daughter of the King. I'm a wife, a mother of 5 beautiful children, and I call myself a voice for the voiceless. My abortion testimony started at the tender age of 15. From the outside looking in, my life looked perfect. My parents were working high-level jobs. We lived in a nice home. They drove nice cars. We went on vacations. Everything seemed great. But inside the walls of my home, there was a lot of dysfunction and abuse, hidden abuse that was happening to me that went unspoken and unnoticed. And so by the time I became a teenager, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. And I ended up getting pregnant. And I tried to hide my pregnancy from my parents as long as possible, but they ended up finding out. And I saw my dad, who had never really mistreated me. I was such a big daddy's girl growing up. I saw him become a completely different person. Now, the reason why is because he's from India. And in India, in Indian culture, it's an absolute disgrace to have an abortion or to be pregnant outside of wedlock. And so anything having to do with pregnancy outside of wedlock is just a complete disgrace. So my dad's initial response is, I want you to have an abortion. And abortion had not even crossed my mind. Like, I thought I was in love. I was excited actually to have a baby. Because I was in such despair in my home life that I thought that having my own baby to love was going to solve all of my problems, and bring me healing, essentially. So when my dad said abortion, I was in shock, but I also did not want to have an abortion. And so I was very strong-willed, and I fought against his threats, and he became very verbally abusive toward me. every day, the intensity of the abuse and the threats and the pressure grew to the point where I finally caved in. And my mom was coming to my room begging me to have the abortion because my dad was threatening to divorce her if I didn't follow through with it. And she's like, I'm going to lose everything. We're going to lose everything. We're going to end up in a like 1-bedroom apartment because I can't afford to care for you and then a child. And so I gave in, and we went to the Planned Parenthood in Iowa City. And I'll never forget walking through the doors of the clinic and sitting down and seeing all these young women around me there to do the exact same thing as me. And I began to cry. I tried to hold back my tears, but I ended up like getting so choked up and so worked up emotionally that they ended up calling me back early because I was disrupting all the women in the waiting room. So I was called back by an ultrasound technician who made sure that I couldn't see the ultrasound monitor, but I scooched up on the bed and I saw my baby's fluttering heartbeat. And I began to cry. And I said, I can't do this. I can't have an abortion. And I started to tell her, I'm like, my dad's the one who wants me to do this. And she said, wait, you don't want to have an abortion? And I said, no. So she had to escort me back out to my parents, and they had to take me home. And that car ride home was horrific. My dad was threatening to drive the car off the bridge, and I just had never experienced anything like this from him. So the next week at home was worse than the first week. And so I gave in once again. And I was taken to a completely different clinic. It was more like a small old house. It was not like a Planned Parenthood. And I spoke with a counselor who made me sign papers saying that I wasn't being forced to have the abortion, and counseled me that my baby at my stage in pregnancy was more like an alien than a baby. And that was supposed to console me and comfort me that this decision was okay. I was taken back to a room, and I was strapped to a bed, and the abortionist came in. He did not look at me. He did not speak to me. He performed the abortion. I heard when my baby was sucked into the vacuum machine, and then it shut off, and there was just complete silence. And it was the most painful medical procedure I had ever had up to that point. And I was always treated with such care by my pediatrician. And so to be treated this way was so confusing, so hurtful, so traumatic. And then I was taken back to an area so they could monitor me. And I was escorted out the back door with my parents. And I went home and had to deal with the pain and the trauma of that abortion all by myself. My parents never talked about it again. However, I became completely different. I was losing hair. I lost a ton of weight. I lost all joy, became depressed, started having suicidal thoughts, and at the same time felt really ashamed of myself for what I had just put my family through. And so I tried to just be a good daughter and get through high school. That was my goal, every day was kind of like me in survival mode. And so I tucked the pain of my abortion so deep down inside my heart that even I forgot about it. I didn't tell the father of the baby. I lied to him and told him that I had a miscarriage. Yep, I lied to him because I was terrified that he was going to break up with me for doing that. And I was living in so much rejection and fear that I couldn't handle that. So that secret stayed with me until I had given birth to all 5 of my children. And I was at a women's event, and 2 women, very anointed women of God, were discerning my hidden pain. And they approached me and told me what the Lord had shown them. And that was my invitation from Jesus to walk down this path of healing from this. I had never talk to anybody about it. So
Well,
my
were they?
healing journey.
Was this conference a pro-life event? Did they share testimony? It was just a Christian women's conference, and they had that discernment. Wow! And I want to kind of
Yes.
go back just a little bit. How was your relationship with your parents after that? I know they didn't want to talk about it anymore, but what was your feelings like? What I know you felt alone, and I have been pressured myself. I understand um,
Hmm.
that
Well,
feeling, but
my
so
mom,
what was
my relationship with my mom was always very strained because part of my story is everything leading up to that abortion. It looked like a perfect life with a nice mom and a nice dad, but what was really happening behind the scenes with my mom was I was being groomed to hide abuse from my
mm,
father. And
mm,
so I always had pent up emotions against her because of the things that were happening. And so I don't believe that my relationship after my abortion improved with my mom. If anything, I became more resentful and
yes,
more hurt. And then with my dad, because I was a daddy's girl and he was not my abuser growing up.
mm,
Um, it was easier for me to forgive him. I remember after my abortion, I was 15, I was going through driver's ed and he was teaching me how to drive. And in his own words, he expressed his regret for what had happened. And he's like, I want you to be a mother someday. I
mm,
want that for you. And he's like, I just want it at the right time. And I knew what he was saying. And I knew I could hear the remorse in him. He didn't come out and say, I'm sorry or I regret this. And I don't know what his feelings ultimately are about that. But I do know that in his own way, he apologized to me. And
well,
it was
it
just
has
easy
to
for
have
me
an
to
impact
forgive.
on them. Yeah, it has to have an impact on them,
Yeah.
and you're right. I could see that was probably his way of saying he was sorry, um, and we might not ever know, but it plays a heavy role on them. It did with my
Yes.
parents as well, and that didn't come to light until after I went through healing. So
Uh,
let's go. So now we're going to move forward a little bit, and these ladies, through the Holy Spirit, recognize that God wanted to take you on a healing journey, and so let's go from
yes.
there. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So one of the ladies was a nurse at a pro-life pregnancy center. And she had never had an abortion, but she was very well versed in abortion recovery. And she talked to so many post abortive women. And she happened to be writing a book. And she was like, Serena, I think God just wants you to start talking about it. Because it was hard for me. Like, I would stutter. And sometimes I just freeze up. I'm like, I can't do this. And she's like, let me just call you on the phone. We're just going to talk about it. And I'm just going to interview you, kind of like what we're doing right now. I'm going to ask you questions. And you just tell me what you remember. And so there were some days when I would avoid her calls because I was terrified and the enemy did not want me to get healing. But she was relentless and she would call me 4 or 5 times in a row and I'd finally answer. And those would be the most powerful conversations. I'd end up in the fetal position on the floor, receiving so much healing just through talking about it. And then I went through, some post abortive healing ministries, Surrendering the Secret, An Even Place. Um, I did a retreat and those were all wonderful. And I continue to go, like every couple of years, I try to attend something, to just see if there's anything else that Jesus wants to heal in regard to my abortion. So after I got healing from my abortion, I had this strong desire to help in the pro-life movement, but I didn't know where to start. And I ended up going to this conference in the Quad Cities. I'm from the same area as Buena Stoltenberg. And so she was at this conference called Pro Life Women, and I was there too. And afterward, I walked up to her, and we knew each other from church. And I was like, Buena, I'm like, I just want to follow you wherever you go. Like,
She's
that's all I
amazing.
said to her. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So Luana took me under her wing and she discipled me. I call her my pro-life mama. And she would invite me anywhere that she went. And I learned from her, and I learned from the best, and she loved me so well. She knew my triggers, because sometimes even once you've gone through healing, when you hear somebody's testimony, it can really, I feel other people's emotions. And so she was always so protective of me. And the first time I gave my abortion testimony publicly was in the Iowa State Capitol in front of a bunch of suited men, lawmakers and legislators. And I remember being so nervous, but when I got up there and I opened my mouth, I felt just a boldness and I felt a passion, and I loved it. And so God continued to open doors for me in government. And I got to go to the White House and share in front of the first Trump administration with Luana and 3 other ladies. And it really built my confidence and showed me my calling to be an advocate and a voice for the voiceless in government. So that started in 2018. And then in 2020, God called us to sell everything, us as in me, my husband, and my kids, to sell everything that we owned. And we bought an RV and we went to Southern California. And we were stationed in the number 2 crime city in the United States, a very broken place. And we did a lot of different ministry there. My husband was interim pastoring. And I wasn't sure what God had planned for me. But our pastor over in Southern California, Lancaster, California, he approached me one day and said, Serena, I just want to give you 5 minutes when the service starts, and I just want you to share whatever you want. That's what the Lord told me to tell you. You can share whatever you want. So I was like, oh, man.
How often does that happen?
I know. I was like, what do I share, Lord? And I felt like God told me to share my abortion story. And so from sharing that testimony that Sunday morning, I had 4 women in that church, all leaders, either pastors' wives or some type of leader, who had never gone through any post-abortive healing. And God just opened up a whole nother realm of pro-life ministry to me that I hadn't ever had any experience in. I was more comfortable over here with the lawmakers and the legislators. And now my new battleground was the church. And it was a beautiful time. And I learned so much. I learned so much about the warfare and how the enemy does not want women to be healed in churches.
Right.
But man, when they do get that healing.
He doesn't want the church to be involved. He doesn't want the church to speak out. He doesn't want the church to, give women a platform. He doesn't want the church to be healed so that we
Exactly.
can be salt and light in the community that God calls us to be. So, yeah, it is a huge spiritual battle within
Yes.
the church as well as outside the church. Yeah.
Yep. And then there was a lady in this particular church that didn't have an abortion in her past, but the Lord had called her to stand on the sidewalks at a Planned Parenthood every week. And she would go alone, and sometimes she would go under a disguise because in California, there's armed security everywhere, and especially at the Planned Parenthood. And so I started talking to her and was just so curious because I had never done boots on the ground work at abortion facilities at that point either. So I ended up going out with her and feeling a call to the front line. And shortly after that, an opportunity opened up for me to get activism training through Live Action. And I flew up to San Francisco, and I brought back everything that I learned and shared it with our church and gathered a small army. And so our presence at Planned Parenthood, it exponentially grew. So the whole goal obviously was to shut down the abortion facility in the community, and then to continue mobilizing and moving to the next one, because there's multiple. California is is such a different place than
Florida.
where I'm at now in Florida.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, so California, we were there for a year and a half, and it felt like God had just thrown me into a boot camp. And so
there was
we
a.
were,
Mhm.
yeah, it was a lot. We were exhausted and needing some rest, and so we went over to Phoenix, Arizona, got a nice rental because we had been living in our RV for a year and a half in California, and we needed a good break. And that's when God started to speak to me clearly about what He had been preparing me for ultimately. And it was right after Roe versus Wade was officially overturned. And I'm like, okay, Lord, how do you want to use me now? And I got a phone call from a friend back home in Illinois, a role in Northern Illinois for 2 pro-life clinics had opened up. It was for an executive director, and she was offered the position, but she said it wasn't for her, but she said she would pray. And she said that the Lord spoke my name to her 3 times. So I interviewed. I've never been an executive director of a nonprofit. I've, done nonprofit work with our own, but on a very small scale. And so I knew it was the Lord because it was beyond me and something that only He could do. We moved back to Illinois, and I found out exactly why God had taken me to California, and it's because Illinois had very recently become an abortion battleground state. Planned Parenthoods were being built along all the borders of Illinois, and it was because all the states surrounding Illinois were becoming states for life. Iowa had passed the heartbeat bill. I think Missouri. I'm not sure about Indiana, but all those women from all those surrounding states were crossing state lines coming to Illinois for their abortions. And our clinics were set up that our target market was the abortion-determined woman. And so it was really powerful. Our model, we called it a medical model, which was kind of new in Illinois. We were one of very few pregnancy resource centers that were taking on a strict medical model, but it was truly because we had been measuring metrics for years and finding that it works and that more women make decisions for life when we did it this way, at least in the community that we were in. So during my time there, we saw 167 babies' lives saved, and that was changed minds, like just incredible, And I also saw the FBI come to our doorstep because there was a lawmaker that was writing a bill to incriminate pregnancy centers. So they were trying to build up a case against us that we were giving false information to women.
I think I know what that lawmaker is.
Do you want me to tell you her name?
Yeah.
her name is Serena Villanueva, and she's a senator. But yeah, I sat next to her in the Illinois Senate and had to testify on behalf of all the pregnancy centers of how it was the abortion facilities that lied to me when I had my abortion and told me everything that was wrong, and how we were giving women the whole truth and giving them all the information about their pregnancy and their options, including abortion, so that they could make an informed decision. And because we were doing that, they were choosing life. It was powerful. She was wiggling in her seat. She hated it. And, that bill got struck down and God got all the glory. But I ultimately believe that's why God called me back to Illinois. I mean, yes, to direct the clinics, but more for that assignment at the state capitol to make sure that I used my voice to, change what the enemy is trying to do in Illinois.
Revelation 12:11 says, we
Yes.
overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And testimony changes hearts and minds and saves lives. And so it's incredible. And He used all of your previous experiences to prepare you for that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that should be encouragement to our listeners and our viewers that, first of all, you can get healing. You can be used by God for good, even though your abortion was regrettable. It caused you a lot of pain. God does save, deliver, and heal, but He has so much more for that experience.
Amen.
Just healing. Healing is critical, but there's so much more to it. And you're one of those testimonies of that, and then
Amen.
and how God opens these doors and puts us in places we never dreamt of going, and,
Yes,
and gives us opportunities we've never dreamt of. But we just have to be willing to let Him use us. And look at the
that's right.
difference He made there. And I know that senator was squish, wiggling in her seat because she's probably had an abortion, you know,
Probably.
and she
Hmm.
was trying to defend that, by
Hmm.
being, if it has to be right, I have to defend it, because if it's not right, then I have to look at my own decision, and how it really impacted me. Well, my producer is over here. I know we're running out of time, but he is saying, your book, let's talk about your book.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
love that. Because
I
God
wrote a book.
gave a book, right? He said, write a book.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. God said, write your abortion testimony, but then go back and share your entire testimony of how God healed you from trauma and abuse. So it's called Becoming a Voice, and you can find it on Amazon.
Okay.
And
Wow.
it starts with my abortion story, and then it goes through all sorts of childhood trauma and how, after healing from my abortion, God took me all the way back and healed me from everything else leading up to that.
Amen. And that is very common in so many situations, including mine. He started with the abortion, but he took me even further back, because
Yes.
abortion is really a fruit of some type of childhood trauma or abuse, and so he wants to heal the whole vessel, not just part of the vessel. And then he creates us into this beautiful image. I've learned, and I believe from that time, that the redeemed version of ourselves is better than the created version of ourselves,
Oh,
and
yes.
definitely better than the fallen version of ourselves. You know,
Yes.
so the redeemed is so much better. So how would you encourage um, listeners or viewers on the show, who may be in your age group or younger, to seek what God has for them? How would you encourage a listener who hasn't done that?
Are we talking about post abortive people or
Let's
anybody?
talk about that first, and then we'll include the rest. Mhm.
Okay. Um, so I like to invite women who have had abortions, but and know that they're forgiven by God and have stopped there, just knowing that they're forgiven. And I always say, you know that you're forgiven, but are you healed? Because Jesus wants to take you down a path of healing. And as scary as it sounds, it's really the best decision that I ever made, that Molly ever made, that this whole pro-life army that's risen up, that's what qualified us to do the work that we're doing. And so if you have a strong desire to be a part of what God is doing, I just encourage you to take that step of faith, take Jesus's hand, and let him lead you down that path of healing. You will not be sorry. And then for everyone else, young women, give Jesus your yes. Just that's what my husband and I have done with our life. We've said, Lord, whatever you require of us, we lay our lives down, and our answer is yes. And God has taken us places that we never imagined, and He will for you too if you give Him your yes.
Amen. That's awesome. I love that. Give him your yes. Wow, that's beautiful. Well, thank you, Serena, for coming on and sharing your beautiful story with us, and how God uses all of our pain for His purpose, and there's so much more for us, especially us who've had an abortion in our past. There's so much more, and we just invite you to go on your healing journey. And like I said, you can call the 1-800 helpline number, which will come across the screen here in a minute. It's 866-721-7881. And there will be people on the other end who can connect you to a healing program in your area. You can go to operationoutcry.org for a list of recovery programs for you. And you can find Serena's book on Amazon. Again, hold up your book one more time. It's a beautiful photo of you becoming a voice, my story of healing from trauma and abuse.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I encourage you to get that book. So anyway, thank you for joining in to More to the Story from Molly White. We look forward to seeing you again next time. God bless you, and thank you, Serena.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, friend. Our broadcasting wanted to take a moment to personally thank you for being a listener of the More to the Story podcast. Whether you're a longtime subscriber or just found us, we're so glad you're here. This podcast is a community built on sharing, and that's where you come in. If an episode has ever resonated with you, please consider sharing it. Text it to a friend, post it on social media. Your recommendation is the most powerful way to help these important stories reach new ears. We are also inviting businesses and individuals to partner with us as official sponsors. Sponsoring the podcast is a wonderful way to reach a dedicated, thoughtful audience while directly supporting our mission. If you'd like to explore sponsoring the podcast, we invite you to visit our website at www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Again, that's www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Thank you for being a part of our story.